With Amazon, I was able to use all of that, but because there wasn't infrastructure already set up, it was brand new, it was blue sky. So you get to really write your own
Get to
playbook.
set up the systems that would collect the data for you to...
Yeah, and you get to also set up all the processes and what suppliers, set up the supplier matrix and bring all of those in. There was nothing, it was absolutely just like an open space of you build it and let's see if it works. And if it works, then we'll kind of like fund your team. So when I started with Amazon, there was literally like one person on my team. And we were able to really get our hands in and, work with all of the different teams, from building out our quality control and our supply chain and the marketing and the branding and getting to choose our logos and what do we want to call them and why and who is our customer and defining that customer profile, setting the price points in the assortment and really getting into what makes a great brand and launching that literally from day zero all the way up to, became $500 million by the end of it.
Hi, everyone. I am here with Liyin, and she is the CEO and founder of the brand Proto101. I'm so excited to be sitting here with you today. Can you tell my audience a little bit about yourself and your brand?
Thank you for having me. So my name's Liyin. I am the owner and founder of Proto101, and Proto101 is all about sustainable, high-quality essentials and basics. And a little bit about me and how I got into the industry was I started 20 years ago, my career at Macy's. And so I started as a product assistant, worked my way up to VP, and was working on their men's portfolio, so building fashion brands for young men's, contemporary, traditional, did all the product development, really worked closely with design, tech, marketing, brand, buying, merchandising, so really getting to know how to build brands.
So, timeline, Macy's 20 years ago, and then your Amazon brought you to the West Coast, to Seattle.
Yeah.
So when did that happen in the timeline?
So I was with Macy's for about 12 years and then was with Amazon for 5 years. Okay. And that was all about they had nothing yet. They were just selling like socks, like Hanes socks and other big retail brands.
Whoa.
And they were wanting
That's crazy because like Amazon now.
Yes. I know. At the time, it was still like kind of a bookstore and they were dabbling in retail and fashion and all of the other. And in the fashion industry, nobody took that seriously. Everyone was like, oh, they just sell books, right? This little online bookstore. That's not going to be a real competitor. And of course we know that we know what happened with that. And so it was a really exciting opportunity to, sort of be tapped to take on a really exciting role in building the brands from scratch and launching them and determining the brand names and the marketing and the product development and what we were going to launch with and what we were going to build and who the customer was. And so it was really exciting to sort of create that right from the beginning because there's no rules.
You could write a book.
And well, what's really different is Macy's gave me such a great a foundation to know how to build and how to build great product and how to source and how to design and work with design and read customer behavior and also run a business and understand, how to be profitable and operationally, how to make that business work. And with Amazon, I was able to use all of that, but because there wasn't infrastructure already set up, it was brand new, it was blue sky. So you get to really write your own playbook.
Get to set up the systems that would collect the data for you to...
Yeah, and you get to also set up all the processes and what suppliers, set up the supplier matrix and bring all of those in. There was nothing, it was absolutely just like an open space of you build it and let's see if it works. And if it works, then we'll kind of like fund your team. So when I started with Amazon, there was literally like one person on my team. And we were able to really get our hands in and, work with all of the different teams, from building out our quality control and our supply chain and the marketing and the branding and getting to choose our logos and what do we want to call them and why and who is our customer and defining that customer profile, setting the price points in the assortment and really getting into what makes a great brand and launching that literally from day zero all the way up to, became $500 million by the end of it.
I have 1,000,001 questions about both Macy's and Amazon, but I want to talk about your brand because that's how we met. Tell me about Proto101. When did that come about? Because maybe starting starting with you being at Amazon in Seattle. So where did the idea come from?
So one of the things that really inspired Proto101 was this idea that we could really do better fashion for the planet, and thinking about the environmental cost, the waste, carbon emissions. One of the sort of ugly stats about the fashion industry is it's the second largest global contributor to carbon emissions.
Like second to transportation, or?
Yeah, and it also contributes to, and that's just, from everything from how it's sourced and produced to the, and I think you're starting to hear more of it now, but sort of the overconsumption of it. And that's really fueled by fast fashion. And the amount of, if you go into a Zara or an H&M, for instance, these fast fashion global powerhouses, they drop something like 22 collections a year. That's 22 seasons. So they're bringing you, they're telling you need to turn over your closet, your wardrobe 22 times a year. And that leads to a lot of impulse purchases and fast fashion, and a staggering amount of that ends up in a landfill.
Yeah.
And yes, people want to say, oh, I recycle it, or I'm donating it to Goodwill, or I'm donating it to these other outlets. But
it's still a volume of products coming into the world that are just
and the reality is a lot of this textiles can't be recycled or reused, and a lot of these places have too much. The solution isn't just to offload it and let it end up somewhere ultimately in a landfill, but how do we solve that problem through creating better fashion and better ways to have a brand that is low impact, high quality, diverting them from the landfill ultimately so that you're keeping these pieces, sourcing better cotton, sourcing better materials like Tencel, thinking about what the carbon emissions are, thinking about the real cost and of making a garment. So when you're buying a $5 t-shirt, how does it get to be $5? That's an insanely low price. And that's because, they're using cheaper cotton that is definitely not being sourced in any kind of eco-friendly or sustainable way. And they're not thinking about the communities that are growing the cotton, or, how is it being produced? And ultimately, when you have a garment that is so disposable and cheap, it will not last. And it is going to shrink or get a hole or something, and ultimately, again, end up in a landfill.
And I think this is such an important and timely conversation to have, because I think the trend in the market, and you can read about this, like Temu and Shein, that turnover cycle is incredibly short. Yeah. And you get a fad or a trend on TikTok, and there's so much writing right now about how there are factories in China that are creating the product so quickly, and that's unprecedented.
And then people are consuming it.
Yes.
They're consuming it, but only for a short time.
Right.
And then it goes somewhere else. But then they don't see where that goes. It's like, okay, well, that's getting donated, or that's just going to get thrown out. And it's no longer their problem. And so then that becomes sort of the environment's problem. What are we doing with all of this? And then thinking about, again, all of the consumption and the overproduction that goes into it is, from a brand and a supply chain side, you are going to make all of these super hot, fast fashion, of the moment pieces, and you're only going to sell maybe 50% of it or 60% of it. You're almost never going to sell 100% of it. And so that excess production also goes somewhere.
Yeah.
Because if it's out of style, it's out of style. You're not going to be able to sell that anymore. Right. And once customers are on to the next fad, that one's dead, and then you have to sort of move that inventory and product. And so it creates just, again, this really, sort of vicious cycle of overconsumption, overproduction, and then ultimately a lot of waste and a really negative impact on our environment.
So contrasting this with Proto101, I do want to segue a little bit and talk about how we met. I met you yesterday.
Yes.
At New York Now. So New York Now is a show here in New York, and it's home goods and gifting, I guess. There's some apparel and jewelry at the show as well. And it was my first time walking the show, your first time showing.
Yep.
And I was kind of walking through, I had some meetings with folks prior to going to the show, but I was just kind of by chance walking by your booth, and I stopped in my tracks because your clothes just looked so comfy and like buttery, the fabric. I like stopped because I wanted, I was wearing clothes I was comfortable. I was trying to be comfortable that day, but I think I was starting to feel kind of like I wanted to wear something. Your clothes look stretchy, but not sweatpants and sweatshirts. It's like more structured and polished.
Yeah.
And so I stopped and I started touching all your things. And then you were so sweet and nice and struck up a conversation with me. And I learned about your brand and you're telling me about your products. And
yeah, ultimately, Proto101 was born out of that desire to like change the fashion industry and be sort of the answer to fast fashion. So really high quality, super soft, versatile pieces and essentials for your wardrobe. So t-shirts, jackets, pants, dresses, everything that you want to wear, whether it's to work or at home or you're running errands or traveling or you're standing, walking around in a trade show. And it really is meant to be pieces that you can wear every day and be really functional. So they're sustainably sourced and they're eco-friendly fibers and ethically produced. But ultimately, we think about the end use of the product, right? In the business of fashion, product is king. You can have a great story, but ultimately people have to feel good and look good and want to be wearing. And clothing is very emotional, right? That is part of your outward
like how
persona.
You present yourself and how you feel in your skin, and that plays into how you show up in your spaces.
And you want to be feeling good in those pieces.
And something that I also really pay attention to as I get older and I travel a ton for work is like how things pack down and also how things wash. And I was just like, okay, this is good quality.
Yeah. And so we use Supima cotton. So we developed this fabric. It's
also, what is Supima cotton?
So Supima cotton is considered to be the finest quality cotton. It's grown in the U.S.
Good stuff.
It is the best stuff. And it is long staple cotton, meaning that it's really going to resist pilling and shrinkage. It feels really super soft and it's going to last in the color. It's going to retain its color. So there's a lot of great properties about Supima cotton. And it's also sourced with the Better Cotton Initiative, so it uses less water, less energy, and it's really also about supporting the community and educating the community that is responsible for growing the cotton.
Oh, okay.
So
cool.
It's got a
It's cool you have a connection also to the community that's growing and producing.
Yeah. And so the goal of how we think about all of our fibers and fabric development and products is how do we make sure that it's good for the people and the planet? And Tencel is the other main fiber that
I was going to ask about to explain what Tencel.
So Tencel it's a plant-based fiber made from eucalyptus trees, bamboo. It is extremely soft,
super
durable.
silky.
Yes. Yeah. And what's great about it is that it's made, and Tencel specifically is made in a closed loop process. That means all of the energy and water that gets reused into making more. So it gets put back into it and there's zero.
Oh, great.
So there's zero byproduct of that. And using and selecting these fibers we're very intentional about that. And that's so that we can make sure that the product ultimately is going to last. The end garment is going to last longer. So it's going to wash really well. It's not going to fall apart.
And you were wearing head to toe.
Yeah.
And you looked so comfy, but you also looked great.
Thank you.
Polished.
You want to still feel put together. It's about not sacrificing style or comfort, but having those two live in harmony. And that's where great product development, design, and that's when you have a great product, is that you don't have to make choices like that. Like, oh, I want to look really cute today, but I also know I'm going to be
I don't feel itchy.
Yeah, and I'm going to be, and I want to be comfortable, and how do I make sure that when I'm going about my day that I'm going to be comfortable? And our products also have moisture wicking and UPF 50 sun protection, breathability. They're not going to shrink, so that you really are prepared for what's going to come at you. And everybody leads a very busy life. You could be a mom, you could be a working mom, you could be a career person, and
bouncing trade shows. That's what I was doing. I was walking back and forth. So I was it's January. It's pretty cold in New York, but that means layers and that means sweating sometimes.
Yes.
And then, so I wanted to wear everything that you had. So I want to shift gears a little bit and learn more about you as a person. You lived in New York for a while. You now live in Seattle. Where did you grow up? Where were you born?
So I was born in West Virginia.
Okay.
I weren't expecting that. My parents they immigrated from Malaysia. So I'm Chinese Malaysian. I grew up in Los Angeles, but I was born in West Virginia. And I really credit my mom, who was really seeking to get a higher education. So she came out to the U.S. with the goal to get a master's. And then my dad followed and then got his master's at UCLA, and that's how we ended up in LA.
I'm also UCLA grad. Go Bruins.
Go Bruins. And I almost went to UCLA. And so I grew up out in LA and went to school in the East Coast in New York. And
What was your major, if I can ask?
I was an economics major.
Okay.
And classic, I think, Chinese family, my parents were like, you can be a doctor, you
Or a
could be a
lawyer.
lawyer,
Yeah.
and you can study business.
Yeah.
And so I took economics. And that, but I was always really interested in fashion and in clothing. And
Was that from like growing up in LA, you think?
it was, and I also studied ballet very seriously.
Oh, cool.
And
I love that.
I studied with American Ballet Theater for
That's why your clothes
summers.
are comfy to move in because
Yeah.
dancer.
And I studied with San Francisco Ballet as well for a couple of
Cool.
summers. And I think that always opened my eyes and love and appreciation for the arts and creativity and
Totally.
fashion. I think is very, there's a lot of overlap in there. And it's just, again, I think it's a really beautiful expression of how you present yourself and how you feel and who you are. And so as I was in school and finishing up my degree, I was thinking about what I wanted to do with my life, and I was stressing and like, what am I going to do? I don't want to work on Wall Street. I don't want to work for a bank. That just felt so intangible to me. And I was binge watching a lot of Friends episodes, and Rachel Green gets her dream job at Bloomingdale's as an assistant buyer. And that
Cute. Oh, I love
inspired me
that.
to start really looking at fashion buying jobs.
Okay.
And so that led me.
I wonder how many women out there. It was like Rachel Green.
Oh, Jennifer Aniston, inspiring a generation, I'm sure, with hair and fashion. And I was definitely one of them. So I started applying to jobs, and that led me to discovering a product development role within Macy's. And I'd never heard about product. I understood buying and planning. And at Macy's, they have a product development program. So when you're for learning how to create brands, and it's really unique, and it's an amazing program. And it really gets you into the nuts and bolts of what's a knit, what's a woven, how do you think about developing an assortment and sourcing fabrics and thread count and choosing colors and setting price points and assortment building.
So you went to Macy's straight out of undergrad.
Yep.
And how did you know about the buying role? Was that something that was facilitated by your college program? Did you have mentors?
My friends were my mentors. They were like, you're going to this interview, you're going to this college job fair on campus, and you're going to give out your resume to these
Good friends.
Yeah, they're good friends. They got me dressed. You're in
Cute.
college. At the time, I didn't have interview clothes, and so my friends were excellent mentors and helped me go get ready for this. And if you're college or if you have access to a job fair, you should absolutely utilize that. It's a wonderful resource because you have hundreds of companies actually recruiting actively on your campus, and that is excellent face time. It's a great way to also get to know, not just for them to get to know you, but also for you to get to know the brands and these companies and what really is going to be a good fit for you. And meeting these folks, the representatives there, and talking to them about what the roles are available and what's the culture like, you will get a good sense of what direction you might want to lean into. But ultimately, I would say networking. A friend of mine's sister nannied for a woman, an executive at Macy's, and submitted my resume, and I was then interviewed through that process. And that ultimately got my first job at Macy's as a product assistant. And so, I would say leverage all of your network and friends, because you don't know who knows somebody, and your dad doesn't need to be the CEO of Macy's. You
never know who's it could be someone's mom's friends.
Yeah.
Like the way your career moves forward, it is so the more you network, the better.
Yeah.
And be in those spaces like a job fair where you can be around people who are willing and able to give you information, and don't be afraid to reach out.
Exactly. And you'll be surprised how many people want to help and support, even if it is just passing along a resume or reaching out to a friend who nannies for somebody. It's absolutely amazing, when you actually put yourself out there, what you get back. But if you don't put yourself out there, you will definitely get nothing back.
Yeah, exactly. So product assistant to start at Macy's.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about your Macy's journey?
Yeah, so I went from product assistant to all the way, and went through every single role: associate, manager, director.
Is it pretty structured at Macy's?
It's pretty structured. And, I was in the private brand and merchandise division, and you have the opportunity to go between product development. You could go to buying. You can also do brand management. But there is a pretty structured path there. It's a very historic institution, so they've got their lanes. And I had some wonderful mentors there, and to this day, they remain mentors to me now, which has been amazing. Continued since I was in my 20s all the way now into my 40s, and there's still people I reach out to for guidance. And so those are some of the best connections and foundation for me. And when I became going through my career there, I really did touch on almost every single role and really got a good scope of how to build a brand and how to run it, how to make sure you have great product, but how do you also make sure you're addressing, all the customer needs? How do you make sure there's enough newness? How to price it? How to make sure you're profitable? And, of course, running a team and running a large business. And that gave me a lot of very useful tools for me to take across to really anything. At the end of the day, it's business. My business happens to be fashion, which is great. I love it. But that's very, it translates.
And you were at Macy's for 12 years, right?
Yep.
And at this time, you were in New York. You were totally Rachel Green. You were 100%. You made it happen. You manifested it. That's so cool.
Yeah. And so I think when I first started at Macy's, my parents were like, so are you working like a perfume counter girl?
That's funny.
And I was like, I promise this is a real job. And yeah, I would never have imagined that me watching that show on repeat, stressing about what was I going to do with the rest of my life, that would lead to the career that I'm on, that I've had, and to launching my own fashion company.
So there are a lot of younger girls who watch this show. Some of them are in high school, some in college, and a lot of them maybe choosing their major, maybe picking their first internships or their first roles coming out of college. What would you say to that cohort of younger women that would love to get some advice? I don't know if you had some really great learnings in your early years at Macy's.
Well, I would definitely take advantage of all of the opportunities that are available through whether it's your high school or your college. Explore all of those, because there are resources there first and foremost. And that already is one connection that gives you an in. And internships are so valuable, even to determine it's something you don't want to do.
Yeah.
And I did internships with fashion magazines. I did an internship with Milk Studios.
Oh, cool.
Explore different aspects of the fashion industry to see what I really resonated with, and also to see where my skill sets were, and to really also get an inside look at what you would be doing. I think sometimes there can be an element of glamour and excitement.
Totally, especially in fashion too.
Right. You think it's going to be photo shoots and stylists and amazing events, and it could not be further from the truth. You're really building, and there's a lot of dirty work and hard work and building things and getting, your hands dirty. And I think that having a real hands-on experience as an intern gets you it's very invaluable, because that tells you, is this what I thought it was? And am I happy with that? And is this what I want to spend the next 5-10 years of my life doing? And so use that as an opportunity to also see if that's something that's a fit for you. I would also encourage you to reach out to your network and beyond, and ask for help and advice and solicit mentors, so that you are also actively seeking out input from people in the industry and your family, your friends, and your friends of family and friends of friends. Somebody will know somebody who's in the industry or company or role or type of business that you are interested in, that can give you advice or offer you an internship or allow you to shadow them. And I think that's extremely useful also. Every bit of experience that you can take on is another little tool in your toolkit. And having all of those helps you then get your first job in that industry and makes you a better candidate. I would also suggest don't be afraid to reach out to folks on social media who you don't know personally. Again, so many people want to help others. There's enough for everybody. You know, all ships can rise. There's me offering advice and help and support to a colleague, a friend.
It feels good to help.
It does. And you want to pay it forward. You know, so many people helped me. I can also help. And that costs me nothing but my time. And I know so many people feel that way, that they would respond with, would love to have a coffee or a phone chat. You know, I do this all the time with folks.
I think so many people would love to reach out to someone like you to be their mentor or to give them guidance. So to hear you say that on camera, like Aru, I have a good friend of mine who's actually a young designer who's launching her brand, and she just raised her hand behind the camera because she's like, she has a lot to learn from you. Yeah. So learned so much at Macy's. You were able to kind of see all these different aspects of fashion. Even you had some internships too prior to Macy's. Tell me about the transition to Amazon, and also give us a little bit of a sense of like maybe the year, if you're okay, because I've had a lot of guests on the podcast in different age cohorts, and I think it's really interesting to hear about e-commerce, to hear about fashion through time and how culture changes, and if you want to touch on that. Yeah.
So I was with Macy's from about 2004 to 2016.
Okay.
And then I was at Amazon 2016 to about 2021. 2021. And that was a really exciting time to, again, build something from scratch, really from the ground up, and have an ability to have a say in every single part of the brand.
Is that why you joined Amazon? You wanted to build that?
Yeah. And, you know, so I think Macy's was my first job and my first company, and I was there for 12 years, which is which is fairly rare to stick with one company for that long and not jump around. But when I was really excited about the opportunity at Amazon because it was, one, brand new. So I would have an ability to take something and mold it and have a lot of input and say about what was getting put out there. And the fact that it was a digitally native environment to grow that brand. At the time, which sounds like I'm 100 years old, the internet, it was still not the primary way people were shopping for clothing, at least. Yes, people were buying soap and toilet paper and things like that. But clothing was still unknown. People were very skeptical. I know, right?
Gen Z, imagine.
It was wild because how do you build something that really doesn't have a physical space? That's almost how the entire industry of everybody who builds a fashion brand, that's how you assort and you build and you buy. It's based off of your physical space. What fixtures are you putting it on? How many t-shirts can you put on a table? How many things can you hang on a rack? What does it look like? How big is your actual physical footprint? And building something that was digitally native was very exciting and new. And it was amazing to do that with all of the research and all of my experience that I could bring and learn at the same time.
You're perfect hire. I'm trying to think, if I was at Amazon, of course, hire you.
Yeah, they got to steal. They got to steal. And for me, it was about I would have the ability to learn so much about how to run and operate a business that is driven by e-commerce, and there is no physical space, but you have different limitations, right? You have a different type of storefront. You know, the Amazon store is gigantic, right? It's never ending. It's truly infinity products on there. So learning about how customer behavior is so much different. When you walk into a physical store, you see product right there on the first table. You can go look at a mannequin, you can try things on, and I can see that they're promoting the pink because it's Valentine's Day, or this, and I can find it. And you walk around the store and that's how you shop and you touch and you feel. But when you're developing a brand for e-commerce, you have to think about differently. How are customers shopping? They're going to type in pink, they're going to type in t-shirt, they're going to type in polo. Like, what are the things that people are looking for? And how...
And then you have a homepage instead of...
Right.
Right.
And it's also a little bit different, of course, with Amazon because there's not one brand that they're showing. They're constantly showing different things. And that's what also was exciting to me, was also to peek a little behind the curtain of how Amazon runs. And and how do they operate this wildly successful and also very different type of business. And it was very exciting to think about what I could learn and how that, and I knew that that would be an important part of any business, is really building out the digital side and the e-commerce side. And I already had the store experience, and so this was really a new frontier. While I could also still bring and add value for them, I was going to be really getting to learn a lot as well, and how they do marketing and, you know, the advertising and so many things that go on behind the scenes that you really don't get to see unless you're working in it day to day.
I'm super interested because my career has always been on the digital side, always on the agency side, working with brands. And so I'm very hyper aware of your digital footprint, data analytics with like user behavior on a website, consumer behavior, like with clicks and like time on page. And I've actually never worked on the brick and mortar side. And that's where you started your career. Is there anything that you would want to share, your observations coming into Amazon, where anything was like really shocking to you, or it was like, whoa, this is e-com and that's not what we had to deal with at Macy's, or this is,
so many things were so shocking. I think there's this perception that Amazon has all of this data and customer behavior data, and so it's just right there for you, all laid out for you the second you walk through the door. And the way I like to describe it is, yes, there is data out there, but it's up to you to figure out how to get it. And so it's sometimes like finding a needle in a needle stack. You have to know what you're looking for, and you have to pull it out. And so there is a lot of still deep diving and writing SQL and getting all of these things so that you can get to some of that great data. And it's not just like, oh, the algorithm told me to make a blue polo. That's not how it works. You still need to bring your common sense, your intuition, your own research, and then you need to validate it with the data. But they're not just feeding us what to do and, you know, here's exactly how to make the best T-shirt or the best polo.
Things might change now. You know, with ChatGPT and
that's true. God knows with what's
maybe
going
use
on.
like natural language to be like, I want to know this, and maybe. But at that time, you definitely had to understand your data. Were you working alongside a lot of engineers, I would imagine, or at least data scientists? Or
yes, as we progressed, when we first launched, we were just building the brands first, and then as we progressed, we added the organization grew, and there was absolutely those types of folks to help us with all of that data analysis and really continuing to grow and scale the brand. You do need to be able to pull in. And then as our customer base grew too for our brands, being able to pull out information around what the customers are saying, what kind of feedback, what's the sentiment, what's the themes, is it fit, is it fabric, what are they saying? And you have thousands and thousands and thousands coming in. So you do need to have the engineers and all of those computer science folks to help you.
I can't believe that you were coming in like a team of two at first, because you had one other person. And that's crazy at Amazon in the apparel. Like now it's huge. And so.
Yes. Yeah. It's very scrappy. You know, when we were building it, it's a very scrappy, bootstrapping environment. And it's exciting because it does feel very much like a startup, and you have the ability to pivot quickly and try things out. But the reason I think that there's always pros and cons, but part of the reason there is when the teams are kept so small, at least in the beginning, you're really forced to invent and figure out new ways to do things. If I had a team of 20 before, and now I have a team of 1 or 2, but we still have all of this to, you know, how do we build multiple brands? How do we work with multiple suppliers? How are we looking at the different customer profiles? You are forced to invent new ways to do that. And referencing what I knew and the foundation of how to build brands and assort and create was very helpful, but I could not rely on that because I did not have the same headcount and resources. Even though Amazon has a lot of resources, of course, if your team is 2 or 3 people, you have to work smarter, not harder, to figure out how are you going to get to that same end result with less resources.
And what a great experience too, because starting your own brand, when you're starting something new, at the very beginning, you're a team of 1.
Yes. And you are everything from the janitor to the CEO.
Yeah. So talk about when did the idea come about? Did you always know you wanted to create your own brand, or was that something that developed over time as you got older, had life experiences? I want to understand the origins of Proto101.
It was definitely something that grew over time.
Okay.
And with experience and going from Macy's to Amazon, my career, while I've only worked for those two companies, I've worked for them for long periods of time. And there's stability there, there's infrastructure, there's so much support when you're in a big, larger organization. And that's very safe and comfortable. And it does provide a great environment to grow and excel in my career, but it will only take you so far. And as I got older and more experience, I realized that there's a better way for us to do some of these things. For instance, the reason that Proto101 became Proto101 and why I launched it was so that I could do something that there was no ability to really have a sustainable brand that focused on really high quality materials. And that's because of what Macy's and Amazon and a lot of bigger retailers are focused on is going to be cost and how many volume.
Yeah.
And that is great for a certain segment of the market. But to do something that is really better and has a mission, we plant a tree also for every garment we produce.
I did not know
and
that.
sell.
That's huge.
So
Yeah,
being
that's
able
cool.
to set the ethos of what we, and be intentional with every piece of clothing. And from how we design it, to how we source it, to producing it, to ultimately even shipping it, everything about that is as eco-friendly and sustainably minded as possible. And that for me was the inspiration to leave and start Proto101. That wasn't possible for me to do in my previous organizations. Those are massive companies. It's hard to move a big ship like that and say, hey, we need to be thinking about the environment and building something that's really better.
Yeah.
That's not going to have this impact. Because how can we do that with just one little piece of Amazon when they have all, when they're doing 1-day shipping and boxes galore? And so that was a big reason to start and to see that you could also build something that was truly great quality and not just cheap and cheerful, but something that was really great quality that you could feel the difference in it when you put it on. And that the materials used and the way it was produced and everybody whose hands touched it have been treated fairly, have been paid well. That's important for, I think, building a better business and a better community and being a part of something that's not just about selling stuff.
Yeah.
And that ultimately was the reason to leave and start something that is what I believe a need in the world.
So what was step one? Did you figure out the name first? Did you make the logo first?
No, product first.
Product first.
Yeah.
And
and the ethos, of course.
Yeah.
What's going to be the differentiator in this brand?
So that's where you started.
You have to start with the product. You have to start with the mission.
There's so many
Yeah.
people who are starting brands. So I feel like I want to get into this. So you start with the mission,
Yes.
the ethos. That makes sense.
Yep.
And then product.
And the product, to me, they all go hand in hand so that you really have a set of values and that keeps you, well, one, that's your reason for being. If I didn't have that, then there's no reason to start another brand.
It's like your anchor.
Who needs another something just selling you stuff, right? You can find that anywhere. So why
Don't just say
do
I'm
you
creating a
have that?
loungewear brand
Yeah,
or performance wear. Like, what's different about
Yes.
you?
Ask yourself, why does the world need this?
Yeah.
What problem am I solving? How am I different? How is my brand different?
Mm-hmm.
And what are the values behind that? I think if you can't answer those questions, then you should take a minute to really think
Like a little bit more time developing.
Yes.
Yeah.
You need to really be able to answer those questions. And if you can't, then you should consider what is the reason that I want to be launching this brand then.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's just to say I launched a new brand or I want to own a company or I have this cool...
It's way too hard and not
Yes.
glamorous to just do that for that.
Well, sometimes I think about the entrepreneur life or day to day, and everyone talks about like working in corporate America. It's like being on the hamster wheel, right? You're just like kind of running in place, and you're just on that little wheel. I think of the entrepreneur day to day as sort of being like a roller coaster. There's like these amazing highs, and then there's gonna be these like valleys,
Dark.
and you don't know when sometimes you're gonna come out of them, and when the next high is gonna be, and sometimes it's a high and a low in like the same day. And if you're gonna really be a brand that is here in 5 years and 10 years, and that's what you want to be a brand that has longevity and is not just a flash in the pan, then you need to be able to have values and a passion and a real belief and a belief that your brand is needed, because you have to have that during those lows, during those little dark times when you're not sure. Because every business is going to have that. And when you're an entrepreneur, that falls 100% on you. And if you are just doing it because you think it's fun or exciting, or like, you won't last, you'll give up. You'll have to give up. You won't want to stick it through. And if you have something, though, that is really built on values and a great product that serves a real need and serves a real problem and has loyal customers who, whether it's good times or bad, they're there, that is the way to really succeed. It's not just about always hitting all the highs. It's about also being able to weather the storms and weather the lows and still come out and still be there at the end of that. Because I think that's where you see a lot of brands go away, is the first sign of a dip, a decline, a tough time, they aren't able to sustain themselves and go past that. And you just have to be prepared for those moments.
So what were your first, I guess, experiences of like validation of your brand?
Really, I mean, the first ones were really small, doing local pop-ups in Seattle and getting the brand out, literally out. So we launched during, Proto101 was launched during the pandemic.
Crazy.
Which is a crazy time. I was telling all my friends and family, I was like, so I quit my corporate job at Amazon and now I, work at the mall. And that was a very scary
Were you also self-funded?
time. Yes.
Okay.
Self-funded.
Ooh, brave.
And still self-funded. And it's really about taking all of the opportunities that you have in front of you to engage with your customers and meet them where they are. So during COVID, people were obviously staying inside and isolating.
How do you engage with them? They're at home.
Yeah. Well, of course, through social media, but there is still something very important, I believe, about having a physical presence.
100%. That's a big topic right now in e-com. Is like how physical didn't die. People thought it was during the pandemic, but it's like back in a big way. And actually Gen Z, behavior-wise, totally shops physical. That's a big part of that cohort. So.
And it is a
experiential
really incredible way to get to know a brand, especially a new brand.
Yeah.
To touch and to feel and to see and to then try it on and be physically in the same space is incredibly helpful and also creates a lot of connection. We're humans. We like to connect with people and have experiences. And it is about having both of those. It's a, very omni-channel strategy. And I think that's how people like to live their lives, a little online, a little in person. And you need to have both of them to sort of complete that circle. And so when we first started, it was like literally pop-ups on the street, with some local businesses, local shops, and just getting the brand and having some of our samples out there, putting the word out through social media, hey, come by and check it out. And starting to get the feedback and the validation in person is so incredible. It tells you right away, like, people like it. If people are just walking by and they touch them, they're like, ooh, let me come by. And, you were walking by and that's
I
how
walked
we
away
met.
And I stopped and I like backtracked in an awkward way. And I was like,
yes,
I
and
like
I
walked
love that.
towards,
I love that.
I do want to see this.
Yeah. And, it's amazing to see that happen in person,
Yeah.
It's hard to know what people are doing online, of course. They say people click, they have to see your brand like 7 or 8 times before they click on something. And in person, if you walk by,
so much learning is like watching someone's physical behavior and like my face or like how I'm
and also
what I'm touching,
what you're touching and what you're saying. And then of course, the next step is like, trying something on and then hearing that feedback too, which is amazing. How does it feel? People love it. And also the critical feedback too. That's also really valuable, hearing what people say about whether it's like, the sleeves are, a little too long, or like this fit is a little bit too loose. And taking all of that feedback has also improved our products as we go into the next rounds of production and development and iterations. So part of it is evolving based off of customer feedback. And you can get that online, of course, through reviews, and that's also super valuable. But hearing it real time, face to face, that's a focus group. That's a mini focus group. And you can replicate that in any number of ways. Of course, what we did was, in addition to pop-ups and reaching out to various stores or retailers where we could do a little pop-up and experience and get folks to come in and try on, we also also solicited all of our network and friends for feedback. Try the products. We're going to send you a t-shirt. We're going to send you a hoodie. Tell us what you think. Give us feedback on the fit, or what do you think about the hood, or, what do you think about these zippers and these pockets, and getting all kinds of just really direct feedback from real people is incredibly valuable when you're starting your brand.
Did anything really surprise you early on launching your brand? Because I'm just thinking about you coming from Macy's and Amazon. I'm like, this chick knows everything. Like, I'm like,
I
knows?
am 100.
No, but I think Macy's is such like a huge legacy, one of the big ones. And like Amazon, of course, is almost writes the playbook on e-commerce sales and scaling. And like you launching your brand, did anything surprise you where you were like, what? Consumers, they like this? Or this is the behavior? Or
I think what did surprise me in the beginning was how much the in-person mattered, and how much people are still craving that, especially during the pandemic and even now, right? I think people are saying, oh, physical stores are dead. They're not. They're absolutely not. People love to experience real life engagement with products, and they like to do it socially too, with friends. And with, if you're out having lunch and you're just walking around and you're doing a little shopping, it's an activity. It is something to be social and have engagement with. And in the beginning, the Proto101 was launched online first, but having that physical presence in our pop-ups, and then later we opened a retail store.
When did you open the store?
In downtown Seattle. That was in December of 2021, so right at the end of the pandemic. Yeah. And that was amazing. So many of our customers discovered us that way, just walking by, just coming through and seeing and wanting to just be like, oh, this is interesting. This is new. This is exciting. Let me come in and check it out. And that was really surprising how many folks were craving that and really seeking out that experience.
So for lots of business owners will be watching, Aru's right here launching her brand. What has been some, I guess, early wins, or what have you tried that has been like really impactful to growing the brand? Like social was very important for you. Is there anything that you could share with people that could be learnings in that area of growing the brand?
Yeah, I mean, I think you want to definitely have a full omni-channel strategy. So social media, an e-commerce site, having some element of an in-person experience is a way that you can really engage with your customers and potential customers and continue that relationship. It's about growing a meaningful relationship with your following, your audience, your customers, and being genuine with that, I think, is really important. Telling your story is also very important. I think there's
Founder story,
what we're doing right now, talking about how did I start this and why did I start this? And that gives a lot of the background into the brand ethos and mission and how we're different and why we're different. And it puts a face to a brand, we're not just another
and I think like
brand on team.
In a culture of like, there's a lot of talk about dupe culture. And we touched on this a little bit about fast fashion and how there can be so many copycat products that come into the market. One thing that can't be like duped is your story.
Yeah.
As a founder, your reasons, which are really important, you highlighted, emphasized as you're starting the brand and as you're developing product, like what makes you different, and then telling that story. I'm going to be interviewing someone later today who's a 25-year-old founder, and she's actually starting a yogurt brand. And she has been documenting her journey from where before she's quit her day job at JP Morgan, and then to the day she quit to developing the logo. And I think that is so smart. And I think that journey is something that will gain you a lot of following because it's authentic, it's real. I think people are really craving that.
Yeah.
With all this Gen AI, as a consumer, you're almost questioning like, is this written by a real person even?
Yeah.
Like, is this even a real image of your product?
Yeah.
And then, but when you're showing that kind of behind the scenes and you're telling that story, I think that is something that really, really resonates with the consumer more than it ever has been before.
I agree. Again, I think it's about that human connection. People respond to other humans and their stories, and that is very much a part of it. And I'm somebody who is not typically I like to be behind the scenes. I like for the product, the brand to speak for itself. But as a founder, you have to be be the face of the brand. And finding the right way for you to do that is very individual for each person. For some, that might be doing dances on TikTok, and that's not me. That's like my biggest fear. But how do I tell my...
Yeah, in a way that's authentic to you.
That's authentic to you. You know, how do you tell your story and still be sharing a very personal side of that journey with your brand alongside of it? And I think you have to find what's the right rhythm for you, and everybody is different. And I think that's what makes it so interesting and unique. You know, it doesn't all have to be the same, because the second you feel like, oh, I'm just doing this because this is...
And you're forcing yourself to do stuff, that's when it doesn't come off as...
People recognize that. People can see
it
that
can be felt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I just tell your story, write it down. How do you want to communicate that? And know that you are the face of your brand.
And I think you're doing an amazing job of it. It feels very authentic and real. And I've got the producer in the corner of my eye. I'm sorry. I could talk to you for hours. Your story is so interesting. Also, you're super cool and you're so nice and approachable. And you were so cool to me. The stranger who came up with a camera. I was like, can I record? You were really sweet. And it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. In these last couple seconds, I want you to tell the audience where people can follow you, where they can purchase your products, and then what you're most excited about with your brand this year, because it's January and it's a new year, and I think it'd be fun to talk about that.
Yeah. Well, you can follow us at Proto101 Official on Instagram and social media. You can also shop with us online at www.proto101official.com. Super easy, very original. And if you're in Seattle or in the Washington area, stop by our store in downtown Seattle or Bellevue. Now, enough of that promotion. But, you know, things that are happening this year, which I'm really excited about, is some collaborations that we've been doing with local artists and businesses. And I think that's so if our products are all about high quality, sustainable essentials, we don't logo our products on the outside, and it's all about how do you like to wear it. And it's really about more the person wearing it than our brand necessarily. And I think that's a really great and fun way for us to collaborate with designers and local artists and allowing them to put their art, their graphics, their pieces on us. So it's almost like artists powered by Proto101.
Cool.
And it's really fun, so we've been able to work with some various folks, and it's a really nice way to also be connected with the community and have a way to just add some fun, excitement, and interest to what we do. And it's also a great way to uplift and support other artists and brands. So it's not just about Proto101, it is about, celebrating and creating together. And then the other piece that I'm really excited about is, part of why I was at the reason I was at the New York Now trade show is just expanding our reach and meeting new store, boutique owners, retailers who are like-minded, who care about quality and the environment and great contemporary products and fashion and want to partner with Proto101. And we'd love to, continue to expand that across the nation and then internationally. So, that's definitely been one of our big goals this year.
Well, okay, I lied. This is actually the last thing. So, because this is going to be a great, for me, for snippets and editing, a golden piece of advice, what you wish you would have heard as a younger version of yourself, because there's so many younger girls that follow this. So what would you tell them that you think would be really helpful, you wish you heard? Or
I have two. One is
perfect.
Don't ever say no to yourself. I think a lot of women and a lot of girls do this, which is, I'm not ready for this promotion. I'm not ready for that raise. Oh, I think I'm going to wait for somebody to tap me.
I don't know if anyone's not ready for the raise.
Well, you'd be surprised how many women do not negotiate. Yes. And maybe that is a generational thing. But a lot of, I've managed a lot of men and women on my teams, and the men always ask for the raise. And the women will wait until they are told, like, you've been doing a great job. Then they often wait to be tapped.
Change that real quick.
And so never say no to yourself. Don't reject yourself. If you're worried or scared, go for it. If you don't think you're underqualified, go for it. Let somebody else reject you. Take that feedback, but don't reject yourself first. And
don't limit yourself.
Yeah. And a lot of women, I think, and myself included, you doubt yourself. You think, I'm not qualified yet, or I think I don't have quite the skill set, or maybe this other person is better. Go for it, push yourself, and let somebody else tell you, you know what, maybe you need to work on this. But you'll be surprised that you will find yourself to be ready for that role, even if you don't fully believe it yet. So don't say no to yourself. Really go for it. And then the second thing is fail fast. Just
That's a good one.
don't be afraid of failing. I think there's
That's a good
there's
one.
a lot of perfection culture and obsessing
Totally,
about like I'm
totally.
going to keep working on this thing and I'm not going to release it until it's absolutely 100% perfect.
Yeah.
And that is impossible. Sometimes done is better than perfect.
Yeah.
And
Then you
fail
gotta ship it.
fast.
Yeah,
Fail fast. Learn quickly and then learn and iterate and move on, but keep going. Don't get yourself so stuck that it has to be so perfect that you take forever to get it done or not get it done, that you never even get it to the point of trying or launching it and seeing what happens. Point is, if you're going to fail, just fail quickly and learn and move.
Don't
and
beat
then-
yourself up.
Yeah,
Just keep it
iterate.
moving.
Just
Keep it
keep
moving.
iterating. Just keep iterating and just keep iterating. And that's how you're going to get to the end goal much faster with a much better product. And you will have learned so much more along the way.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much. You are
Yeah,
so
thank you
much
for having
being
me.
here. Oh, I love this. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. Have a great day. Take care.